What if the war in Iran isn't just about Iran? What if it's actually part of something much bigger? A global power struggle between the United States and China? At first glance, this conflict looks like another Middle East crisis. But behind the explosions, sanctions, and military strikes, there may be a deeper game unfolding. A game about energy, influence, and the future of global power. The United States says it's about stopping nuclear threats. Iran says it's defending its sovereignty. And the world sees another familiar headline: war in the Middle East. But this conflict is already stretching global resources, even forcing the US to delay weapons shipments to its allies. Meanwhile, Iran still holds thousands of missiles and drones. Despite heavy attacks, this is not a short war. This is a strategic confrontation. To understand the bigger picture, you need to understand geography. Iran sits near one of the most critical choke points in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. A large portion of global oil flows through this narrow passage. And here's the key: China depends heavily on that oil. Nearly half of China's imported oil comes from the Middle East. If this route is disrupted, China's economy feels it almost immediately. This is where the story shifts from regional conflict to global strategy. China and Iran are not just distant partners.
Our nations will
They are
benefit greatly
economically
to our
connected.
shared prosperity.
China buys
to a
large amounts of
stronger future.
Iranian oil, often at discounted prices due to sanctions. And beyond oil, Iran is part of China's long-term Belt and Road strategy. So when Iran is under pressure, China's interests are also at risk. But here's the twist: China is not directly entering the war. Instead, it watches carefully, because instability creates both risk and opportunity. Some analysts believe this war could actually benefit China. Why? Because it distracts the United States. Military conflicts are expensive. They drain
Status on the
resources,
Northern Convoy?
they
On
divide
schedule,
attention,
ETA 0300.
and they
Sir,
create
logistics
global
report supply routes are
uncertainty.
clear.
In
Good.
fact,
Update
some
CENTCOM.
experts argue that
Roger that,
prolonged
relaying
conflict
now.
could weaken
Yuan is
US global
strengthening. Naval
influence,
patrols are moving to secure
while
shipping
China
lanes. Confirmed.
continues
GDP growth is down
expanding its
4.8%
economic and
mobilized.
strategic
Port
reach.
throughput is at a record.
In other
We need
words,
to respond.
the
Escalate
longer the
readiness.
war lasts, the more complicated America's position becomes. What if this war is not a distraction, but part of a larger strategy? Some analysts suggest the conflict could indirectly pressure China by threatening its energy supply lines. If the Middle East becomes unstable, China's access to cheap and steady oil becomes uncertain, and that could slow its rise. So instead of being a distraction, this conflict could be a strategic move in a much bigger rivalry. The truth is, this is not a simple story. China is affected but also cautious. The US is active but also stretched. And Iran remains a key piece in the global puzzle. Even global markets react instantly. Oil prices rise and fall depending on
监
tensions
测
in the
到数据异
region.
常，立即上报。
This is no longer
风浪
just
加
a
大，检查
regional
船舶稳
war.
定性，
It's a
启动紧
global
急意外准
pressure
备应对
point.
各小组确认位置，保持联络呀。
So, is the Iran war part of the US-China rivalry? Not entirely, but it's deeply connected. Because in today's world, no major conflict stands alone. Every war is part of a bigger game. And the real question is, who is actually winning?
It's
If you want
crashing!
to understand
Sell
the
everything
real
now!
forces
Halt is triggered.
shaping
Makes
global
exploding.
power,
Get
make
me
sure
out!
to
I'm getting
subscribe.
margin call!
Because the next
Hold on,
conflict
guys!
might not be where you expect.